The air inside the alien chamber was heavy and cold, as if the walls themselves were alive and watching. The human stood in the middle of the vast hall, his hands bound in strange glowing chains that hummed like angry insects. The floor beneath his boots was smooth black stone, and every step echoed as if warning him that he should not be here. Tall figures moved in the shadows above him, their armor glinting with silver light, their glowing eyes burning like small fires in the dark. He was the only human in this place, surrounded by creatures that had conquered entire star systems, creatures that saw him as nothing more than prey. The leader stepped forward. She was taller than any soldier in the hall, her armor darker, her cloak dragging like a shadow across the floor. Her face was pale and sharp, her eyes glowing bright orange that seemed to cut through his skin. She moved closer, each step slow, deliberate, echoing against the stone. She stopped only a breath away from him and leaned down until her eyes locked with his. Her voice was low, filled with curiosity and danger, like the hiss of a snake ready to strike. "Why aren't you afraid?" The words spread through the hall like thunder. Every alien soldier standing along the walls straightened. Some tilted their heads in confusion, others sneered, waiting for the human to break down, to scream, to fall to his knees like every other prisoner before him. But the man did not move. His breathing was steady, his chest rising and falling slowly, and though sweat clung to his face, his eyes did not look away from hers. The alien commander circled him now, like a predator circling its prey. Her long fingers brushed the chains that held him, and sparks of energy danced across his skin, burning tiny marks into his arms. She watched his reaction carefully, waiting for the flinch, waiting for him to beg. But he only clenched his jaw, staring straight ahead. The silence was thick, broken only by the hum of the chains and the low whispers of the soldiers watching. "Do you not understand what I am?" the commander asked again, her voice sharp this time. She lifted one hand, and the air shimmered, revealing an image of burning cities, of human colonies crushed under alien fleets. "Your kind falls to its knees when it sees us. Your leaders surrender before we even strike. Fear is your only shield, and even that is weak. So why?" She stepped back in front of him, her glowing eyes narrowing. "Why aren't you afraid?" The human's lips curved slightly, not in a laugh, but in something sharper, something the aliens had never seen before, a smile filled with defiance. His silence was louder than words, and it spread unease through the ranks of soldiers. They began to shift uncomfortably, their eyes flicking between their leader and the strange human who refused to tremble. The commander's patience thinned. She reached out suddenly, her clawed hand grabbing his face, forcing his head up. The sharp tips pressed against his skin, close enough to draw blood if she wished. The glow in her eyes brightened as if she could burn the truth out of him by force. "Speak, human. What lies behind those eyes? What keeps you standing when your body should be shaking?" For a moment, he simply looked at her, his face firm even as her claws dug deeper. The chains crackled louder, reacting to the rising tension. Somewhere in the hall, a soldier let out a low laugh, mocking the human's silence. But when the man's gaze shifted toward that soldier, the laugh died instantly. His eyes carried something strange, something more dangerous than fear, something that unsettled even those who had never feared anything before. The commander let go of his face and stepped back, her cloak swirling around her legs. The air felt colder now, as if the walls of the chamber themselves were leaning in, waiting for his answer. The human slowly straightened, lifting his head high, and for the first time, the chains rattled not because of weakness, but because he pulled against them. His shoulders squared, his eyes steady, and the faint smile still touched his lips. The silence stretched too long, too heavy. Every soldier leaned forward, their claws flexing, their tails twitching, their armor clicking softly as they shifted. They expected begging, perhaps madness, or maybe the final break of his mind. Instead, the human's calmness spread like fire, reaching even the most hardened warriors, who now wondered why their leader had not already ended him. The commander's eyes narrowed further. She took another step forward until their foreheads were nearly touching. "Then tell me," she whispered, her voice low enough that only those nearest could hear, though the hall was so silent it carried to all. "Why aren't you afraid?" The human let the silence linger one heartbeat longer, letting every creature there lean closer. letting their anticipation grow sharp like blades. His voice came finally, quiet but strong, carrying to every corner of the hall. Each word was measured, each syllable sharp. He gave them his answer. And with it, he shattered the balance of the room. The alien commander froze, her eyes widening for just a moment, her armor-clad body still as stone. The soldiers along the walls exchanged glances, confusion and shock spreading like ripples in water. None had expected this. None had heard such words before. His answer, simple yet powerful, cut deeper than any weapon could. The chain still bound him, but now he seemed taller, stronger, as if invisible hands lifted him higher than all the towering figures surrounding him. The silence that followed was different this time. It was not the silence of fear, but the silence of something new, something none of them had felt before. And for the first time, it was not the human who seemed out of place in the chamber of monsters. It was the aliens who looked at each other uneasily, their confidence shaken, their commander's question echoing in their minds without rest. Why wasn't he afraid? And why did his answer make them question themselves? The human's words cut through the chamber like a blade. His voice was not loud, but every alien heard it clearly, as if the walls themselves carried it. "I am not afraid," he said slowly, his eyes locked on the commander's glowing stare. "Because fear changes nothing. If I am to die, then I will die standing. And if I live, it will not be because I begged." The words seemed simple, but in that silence, they carried more power than any weapon could. The alien commander did not move. Her face, cold and perfect like carved stone, showed no reaction, but her eyes betrayed her. The orange glow flickered for the briefest moment, as if something inside her shook. No one had ever dared speak like that in this hall. No one had dared to look into her eyes without trembling. The soldiers around her shifted uneasily, some lowering their gazes, as if the human's courage was too sharp for them to meet directly. A low murmur spread among the ranks, whispers in their alien tongue. He does not fear. He is lying. He hides his fear. Yet the longer they stared, the more their words died in their throats. His posture, the calm set of his face, the quiet strength in his tone, none of it matched the weakness they expected from a fragile human. The commander tilted her head, studying him with the curiosity of a predator that had found prey unlike any other. "Do you think this will save you?" she asked. "Do you think words will protect you from pain?" Her hand lifted, glowing with energy, and she struck the chains with a sharp gesture. The bands tightened, sparks burning into his skin. The smell of scorched flesh filled the air. Still, he did not scream. His jaw tightened, his eyes closed for only a breath, then opened again, steady and sharp as before. Her soldiers hissed in approval, eager to see him break. Yet when he did not, when the pain only carved more iron into his voice, some began to question what they were witnessing. The commander stepped closer again. "Then tell me, human," she whispered, her words sharp as a blade against his throat. "What is it that makes you stand when all others fall? What fire burns in you that fear cannot touch?" The human's smile returned, faint but defiant. "Because I have lived with fear all my life," he said. "Fear of hunger, fear of loss, fear of war. Fear sits with every human child before they can even walk. We learn young that fear is not the end. It is the beginning, and once you face it, it has no power left." The hall grew colder with his words. Aliens who had fought endless wars suddenly felt a chill they could not explain. They had weapons, fleets, entire planets under their rule, but none of it could touch what this single human had just spoken. To them, fear was a tool, the greatest weapon they wielded over conquered worlds. And yet here was a man telling them that fear itself was powerless. A soldier slammed his spear against the ground, snarling. "Blasphemy!" he shouted in their tongue. "He mocks us." Another hissed agreement, their tails lashing, their claws flexing. They wanted blood, wanted to silence him before his words spread further. But the commander raised her hand, and the hall fell silent again. Her eyes did not leave the human's face. She wanted to see if he would waver. She wanted to break him herself. Yet the longer she looked, the more she felt something she could not name pressing into her chest. It was not anger, nor hatred. It was something far more dangerous to her kind. Doubt. The human sensed it. His voice grew steadier, stronger, as though speaking gave him more strength than the chains could take away. "You conquer with fear because it is all you know," he said. "But we conquer fear itself. That is why you will never truly own us. Kill me if you wish, but you cannot break me." The words struck the chamber like lightning. Even those who hated him the most could not deny the weight behind them. Some of the younger soldiers lowered their eyes, unsure for the first time in their lives. A single human, bound and wounded, had made them question their entire belief. The commander turned sharply, her cloak sweeping the floor. She could not let them see what she was feeling. Yet her mind replayed his words again and again. She wanted to dismiss them, call them foolish, but they lingered like an echo she could not silence. From the far end of the hall, one of the elders spoke, his voice ancient and rough. "If he does not fear death, then let him prove it. Let us see how long this fire lasts when the shadows close in." His words carried authority, and the soldiers hissed in approval. The test had been declared. The commander looked back at the human, her lips curling into something between a sneer and a smile. "You have spoken boldly," she said. "Now you will face the truth. Tomorrow you will enter the trial. If fear is nothing to you, then survive it. If not," she let the sentence hang unfinished, but the soldiers knew what it meant. The trial had claimed every prisoner before him. None had ever returned. The human only nodded once, calm as if she had told him the weather. His steady eyes unsettled her more than screams ever could. She expected pleading, but he gave her only silence and strength. As the guards dragged him away, the whispers grew louder. Some mocked him, already imagining his death. Others kept silent, their minds tangled in confusion. A single question remained with them all, the same question their commander had asked at the beginning. Why wasn't he afraid? And as the heavy doors closed behind him, even the commander herself wondered if, by tomorrow, she would finally have her answer, or if his words would live longer than his body. The trial began in silence. The human was led through long halls, his chains removed only when the great gates opened before him. The chamber beyond was not a room but a vast labyrinth, glowing with strange blue light. The floor was uneven stone, the walls alive with shifting patterns like veins of fire, and the air smelled of dust and blood. No sound came from outside. Once the gates closed behind him, the world beyond no longer existed. Only the trial remained. From hidden openings above, the alien soldiers watched. Their glowing eyes shone in the darkness, eager to see him fail. The commander stood at the highest balcony, her expression calm, but her mind filled with questions she refused to admit even to herself. She had wanted to see him break, to watch his courage shatter, but part of her wanted to know if his words about fear were true. The human stepped forward slowly, his footsteps echoing in the vast silence. The labyrinth seemed endless, each turn leading into deeper shadows. Strange markings covered the walls, some glowing faintly, others pulsing like living creatures. His body was sore from the chains, his skin burned from the energy shocks, but his eyes remained steady. He moved carefully, one step at a time, alert but calm. The first danger revealed itself quickly. A low growl filled the air, deep and hungry. From the shadows ahead, a creature emerged. It was taller than him, with 4 legs, scales shining like steel, and eyes glowing red with hatred. Its teeth were long, curved like blades, dripping with saliva that hissed as it touched the stone. The soldiers above leaned forward, expecting screams. The creature roared and charged, its claws tearing deep marks into the floor. The human did not run. His heart beat faster, but his body moved with sharp focus. He waited until the last moment, then rolled aside, the beast crashing into the wall behind him. Dust fell from the ceiling. He grabbed a shard of stone broken from the impact and held it like a knife. The creature turned with another roar, swinging its claws. He ducked, slashing with the stone, cutting across its face. The beast howled, its blood dark and steaming. The battle was long and brutal. The creature struck again and again, each blow powerful enough to crush bones, but the human used speed, rolling, ducking, striking where he could. His arms bled, his clothes tore, but his will did not bend. At last, with a final desperate strike, he drove the stone deep into the creature's throat. It thrashed, let out one last terrible cry, and fell heavy onto the ground, its glowing eyes fading to black. Above, the soldiers hissed and muttered. Some were impressed, others angry that he still lived. The commander's eyes narrowed, but her face remained unreadable. She had seen many trials, but never had a human lasted this long. Never had one killed the beast with bare hands. The human leaned against the wall, catching his breath. His chest heaved, sweat and blood dripping down his body, but his eyes still carried the same fire. He whispered to himself, not prayers, but steady words. Keep moving. Don't stop. Fear feeds on stillness. Then he pushed himself forward again. The labyrinth grew darker. Strange lights flickered along the ground and leading him deeper into its heart. At one corner, the floor shifted under his weight, and sharp spikes shot up from hidden holes. He jumped back just in time, the tips grazing his skin. The traps were designed to kill quickly, but his sharp eyes and quick steps saved him. He learned to test the ground, to listen to the faint hum that warned of danger before it struck. Hours passed. He fought hunger, thirst, and pain, but his steps did not falter. The soldiers above grew restless. Some laughed bitterly, saying it was only a matter of time. Others, though, stayed quiet, watching closely, their minds struggling with a thought they could not yet name. The next challenge came with sound. A whispering filled the halls, strange voices calling his name. Voices of people he knew, people he had lost. The labyrinth played with his mind, trying to break his spirit. He stopped in the middle of the hall, sweat running cold down his back. The voices grew louder, accusing, crying, begging. For a moment, his knees shook. The soldiers above leaned forward eagerly, certain this would be the end. But the human closed his eyes and forced his breathing to slow. "These are not real," he whispered. "Fear speaks lies." His hands curled into fists, and he walked forward through the storm of voices without turning his head once. The whispers screamed at him, but he kept walking until the sound faded behind him, leaving only silence again. The commander's hand tightened on the railing. She had seen warriors fall to those illusions in minutes, their minds broken beyond repair. Yet this human had walked through as if fear itself could no longer reach him. She felt something dangerous in her chest, something she had not felt for centuries: respect. At last, the human reached the center of the labyrinth. The floor opened into a vast chamber, filled with blue fire burning in great pits. Across the flames stood another creature, far larger than the first. Its wings spread wide, its body armored with bone plates, its roar shaking the ground. The final test. The soldiers above let out cries of excitement, their voices echoing in the chamber. The human stood still, watching the beast. His body was weak, every muscle screaming, but his eyes were calm. He picked up another shard of stone, his only weapon. The beast roared again and charged, fire bursting from its mouth. The human leapt aside, rolling across the hot ground, flames licking his skin. He screamed once, but not in fear, in fury. The battle was chaos. Fire lit the chamber, claws tore at the ground, and the human's body moved with desperate speed. Again and again he was knocked down, cut, burned, yet he rose each time, refusing to stay down. The soldiers shouted above, some cheering for his death, others silent, stunned by his will. The commander leaned forward, her orange eyes wide, unable to look away. The human climbed onto the beast's back, clinging to its scales as it thrashed and roared. With every ounce of strength left in him, he drove the stone shard again and again into its neck. At last, the beast staggered, roared one final time, and collapsed into the flames, its body burning as the human rolled away, coughing, bleeding, but alive. Silence filled the chamber. The human rose slowly, his body broken, but his eyes still steady. He looked up at the balcony, his face streaked with sweat and ash. He had survived. The soldiers did not cheer. They did not laugh. They only stared in disbelief. And for the first time, many of them wondered if perhaps fear truly did not rule over this man. The commander's lips parted, her breath caught, though she quickly hid it. Yet deep inside, she knew something had changed. The human had faced their trial of fear and lived. And nothing in their world would ever be the same again. The gates of the labyrinth opened with a heavy grinding sound, and the human stepped out. His body was covered in cuts, burns, and blood, yet he stood tall. His shoulders were straight, his eyes sharp, and his steps steady. The guards expected to see a broken man crawling, but what came out looked more like a warrior than a prisoner. The soldiers who lined the hall fell silent. Their glowing eyes followed him as he walked, and for the first time, none of them dared to laugh. The commander watched him closely. Her orange eyes burned, but deep inside, something twisted she could not name. She had watched humans beg, scream, and die. None had lasted through the trial. None had faced the shadows and beasts with such calm. Yet here he was, alive, unshaken. She wanted to believe he had simply been lucky, but her heart told her luck had nothing to do with it. The elders gathered, their cloaks dragging across the stone floor. One of them hissed loudly. "He is dangerous. A human should not live through our trial. His survival is a threat to our order." Another added, "Kill him now. End this before the seed of doubt spreads." Their voices echoed like cold steel, filled with fear disguised as authority. But not all agreed. A younger soldier stepped forward, his claws clicking nervously. "No human has ever faced the beasts and lived. Maybe there is more to him than weakness. Maybe his courage is worth learning from." His words caused a sharp hiss from the elders, but others nodded quietly, too afraid to speak louder yet unable to ignore the thought. The chamber was no longer united. The humans' survival had divided them. The human stood silently in the center, listening to the voices around him. He could feel the tension. Some wanted him dead, others wanted him spared. But he did not beg, did not argue. His silence itself was a weapon. The commander saw it and clenched her fists. His refusal to fear or plead unsettled everyone, shaking the foundation of their authority. She stepped down from her high place and walked toward him. Her cloak swept the ground, her boots striking sharp against the stone. The soldiers moved aside, their eyes wide as she stopped directly in front of him. For a long moment, she simply looked at him, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke, her voice low but cutting through the noise. "You have lived through what none before you could, but do not mistake survival for victory. You are still our prisoner." The human's lips curved in a faint smile. He lifted his head, his voice steady. "Prisoner or not, I am still standing. That is more than you expected." His words were simple, but they struck deep. Soldiers glanced at each other, some whispering, others hiding their unease. The commander felt heat rise inside her chest. Not anger, not pride, something in between. She wanted to silence him, yet she could not deny the truth of his words. Her people had built their empire on fear, but he had broken it without lifting a blade. He had survived the trial, and in doing so, he had planted doubt inside her soldiers' hearts. One elder hissed again, stepping closer. His voice cracked with fury. "This is poison. His words weaken the army. If we allow him to live, he will spread this disease of courage. Kill him now." He raised his clawed hand to strike, but before he could, another soldier blocked his path. The soldier's voice was low but firm. "No, let him speak. We have silenced too many voices before. Perhaps it is time we listen." The hall exploded in whispers. Some soldiers shouted for silence. Others hissed in agreement, the sound like 1,000 snakes in the dark. For the first time in centuries, unity was broken. The human had not only survived the trial, he had divided them. The commander raised her hand, and the noise died down slowly. She stared at the human, her eyes searching his face. She wanted to know why his calm cut deeper than any weapon. She wanted to know why, even after everything, he still smiled. But most of all, she wanted to know why part of her chest ached when she looked at him. The human spoke again, his voice calm but strong. "You fear me not because of my strength. You fear me because I show you the truth. Fear is only power if you let it rule you, and I do not let it." His words echoed through the chamber. Some soldiers bowed their heads, as if unwilling to admit how much they agreed. Others clenched their fists, furious at how easily he tore at their beliefs. The commander's lips parted, but no words came. Her silence was louder than anything. For a moment, her soldiers looked not at their elders, not at their traditions, but at her. She was the one who had asked the question, "Why aren't you afraid?" And he had given the answer that now burned in all their minds. The elders hissed again, demanding action, but their voices no longer held the same weight. The soldiers' loyalty was shifting, small but undeniable. Some now looked at the human with respect, others with confusion, but fewer and fewer with hatred. The change had begun, and no command could stop it. The commander turned sharply, her cloak spinning behind her. "Enough," she said. "He lives, for now, but his fate is not yet decided." She looked back at the human one last time, her orange eyes filled with conflict she could not hide. Then she walked away, her soldiers following, though many glanced back at the human, their faces uncertain. The human stood alone in the chamber, blood still drying on his skin, but he felt no weakness. He had seen their division, seen the cracks forming in their unity. They had tried to use fear to crush him, but instead, fear had turned against them. And somewhere deep inside the commander, Doubt had begun to grow. She had wanted him to tremble, to break, but instead he had forced her to question her own strength. She hated it, yet she could not let it go. His answer still echoed in her heart. Why wasn't he afraid? The chamber that once belonged to the aliens no longer felt the same. The balance of power had shifted, not through weapons or force, but through the courage of one human who refused to bow. And though no one spoke it aloud, every soldier knew the truth. They had witnessed something that could not be undone. The human was placed in a dark cell after the trial, but it was not the same as before. The walls were the same cold stone, the air heavy with the same damp smell, but the silence around him was different. Outside his cell, guards shifted more than usual. Their footsteps were restless, their whispers low but constant. The man could feel it. His survival had changed something. Fear no longer belonged to him. It belonged to them. He sat against the wall, his body aching from wounds, but his mind steady. He closed his eyes and let his breathing slow, ignoring the pain. For him, this was nothing new. He had lived through hunger, through war, through the loss of people he loved. Pain was not an enemy. It was a reminder he was still alive. Hours passed before he heard soft footsteps stop outside his cell. The small hatch opened and a tray of food slid in. But instead of silence, a voice whispered, "Why did you do it?" It was not the rough voice of a soldier. It was softer, filled with something strange, curiosity. The man looked up. On the other side of the bars, standing in the glow of the dim light, was the alien commander. Her cloak was gone, her armor lighter, but her eyes still glowed with that sharp orange light. She was not supposed to be here. Leaders did not visit prisoners. Yet here she stood watching him. He did not answer at once. He studied her, noticing the way her hands tightened slightly against the bars, as if she was holding back something she did not want to show. Finally, he said, "Because I had no choice. If I gave in to fear, I would already be dead." Her eyes narrowed. "But you are still human, weak, fragile. Fear should rule you. It rules all." Her voice sounded harsh, but underneath it was something else, a question she could not stop asking herself. The man smiled faintly, his face calm even in the dim light. "Fear rules only those who let it. I do not." For a moment, she said nothing. Her eyes searched his face, as if trying to see if he lied. She had seen countless humans before, all broken, all begging. Yet he was different, and she could not explain why. A sudden hiss echoed from the hall, and a soldier appeared, bowing quickly. "Commander, you should not be here." His eyes flicked nervously toward the cell. "The council will not approve." The commander's gaze turned cold, and the soldier lowered his head at once. She dismissed him with a sharp gesture. When he was gone, she turned back to the man. Her voice was softer now, almost too quiet to be heard. "You helped one of my soldiers. Why?" The man tilted his head. He remembered. In the labyrinth, one soldier had been pulled into danger by the shifting floor, the traps almost taking his life. The human, though bleeding and weak, had pulled him back, saving him from being skewered by spikes. The act had shocked everyone. Why would a prisoner save a guard? "Because he was alive," the man answered simply. "And life matters, even if he is not human." The commander stared at him as if he had spoken in a language she had never heard before. For her people, life was power, and the weak had no value. To hear a man chained, broken, and still bleeding speak of life with such weight unsettled her more than the trial itself. Her silence stretched, but the man did not look away. At last she whispered, "You are either the greatest fool I have ever seen, or—" She stopped, her voice trailing off. She did not finish the thought, but he caught the flicker in her eyes. Respect. The next days changed quietly. When food was brought to him, it was no longer stale and cold, but fresh and warm. The guards who once spat at his feet now looked at him with hidden glances, some angry, some uncertain. One even muttered a word that could almost be respect. At night, the commander returned, always in secret, always with questions. "Why did you not run in the labyrinth? Why do you smile when chained? Why do you speak to me as if I am not your enemy?" Each time, his answers were simple, yet they unsettled her more. "I did not run because running does not save anyone. I smile because you expect me to fear you. I speak to you as I would anyone else, because you bleed like I do, you breathe like I do. Enemy or not, you are still alive." Her heart tightened each time. No one had ever spoken to her like this. Not her soldiers, not her elders, not even those she called equals. They all bowed in fear. But this human, who should have been crushed long ago, spoke as if he stood higher than the stars. The bond grew, though she tried to deny it. She told herself she was studying him, that she only wanted to understand how he resisted fear. Yet when she walked away each night, she found herself thinking about his words long after they were spoken. The division among the aliens deepened. Some soldiers whispered of him as a curse, others as a sign. The elders demanded his execution before he poisoned more minds. Yet others began to watch the commander closely, noticing the way her eyes lingered too long on the human's cell. One evening, she arrived again, her cloak wrapped tightly, her eyes sharper than usual. "They want you dead," she whispered through the bars. "The council demands it. They say you are dangerous." The human leaned forward, his voice calm. "They are right. I am dangerous. Not because of strength, because I have shown them the truth." Her breath caught. The fire in his words struck her deeper than any blade could. She realized then that she no longer looked at him as prey or as prisoner. She looked at him as something else, something she dared not name. In that moment, she understood why the elders feared him so much. It was not his survival, not his defiance. It was the change he carried. He had touched her with it already, and if left alive, he would touch others too. And yet, as she stood there in the silence of the prison hall, she found that the idea of him dying unsettled her more than anything. The council gathered in the great chamber, their cloaks dragging against the stone floor. The air was tense, thick with the smell of burning oils and old dust. At the center of the room, the human stood bound again, but his posture was steady, his eyes fixed forward. Soldiers lined the walls, their claws tapping against their weapons. Some glared at him with hatred, others with unease, and a few with something more dangerous, respect. One elder's voice cut through the silence. "This human lives too long. He survived the trial when none before him could. He speaks words that weaken our soldiers. His presence is poison. He must die." His sharp tone was met with hisses of agreement from some, but not all. Another elder rose, his eyes glowing faintly. "Yes, kill him, and let fear return to its rightful place." He pointed one long finger at the human. "Fear is our law. Fear is our strength. And yet he stands here without it. If this spreads, our order will crumble." The human listened calmly, his face without panic. When one elder leaned closer and hissed, "Do you hear, human? You will die tonight," the man only smiled faintly and said, "Then let it be tonight. But know this, you will kill my body, not my courage." Whispers broke out across the chamber. Some soldiers shifted, uncomfortable, their eyes darting toward their commander. She stood at the high balcony, her orange eyes watching everything. Her hands were tight against the rail, her jaw clenched, though she hid it well. She had argued in private that he should live, that perhaps he had value. The elders had silenced her, accusing her of weakness. Still, she could not shake his words. The decision was made. The execution would happen before dawn. Soldiers were ordered to prepare. The council's voices rose with finality, but under the surface, something had cracked. That night, as the torches burned low, the human sat in his cell. His body was tired, his wounds still fresh, but his mind was calm. He whispered to himself, steady words that kept him from sleep. "Fear feeds on silence, but courage speaks." He closed his eyes, resting, knowing what awaited him. The sound of footsteps echoed. This time, it was not the usual guard. It was her. The commander stepped into the dim hall, her cloak pulled low, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. She stopped at his cell, her voice sharper than before. "They have chosen. At dawn, you die." The human opened his eyes and nodded once. "So be it." His voice carried no fear, no bitterness. Her hands tightened at her sides. "Why do you not fight it? Why do you not beg for life?" "Because begging changes nothing," he answered softly. "And fighting chains is wasted strength. If I die as I lived, without fear." Her chest tightened with something she had never felt before. For centuries, she had ruled soldiers who obeyed out of terror, who bent because of her strength. But this man, fragile by all measure, spoke as if death itself bowed to him. She hated it, yet she could not deny the respect building inside her. She leaned closer, her voice lowering. "They will not only kill you, they will erase you. No one will speak of you again. Your courage will be buried." The man's lips curved into a small smile. "Then let them bury it. Seeds grow in the dark." Her breath caught, and for the first time in her long life, she had no answer. She turned away, her cloak swirling, but her steps were slower than before. She did not want him to see the conflict in her eyes. When dawn came, the soldiers gathered in the great square. The sky above was red with morning light, the air cold and sharp. The human was brought forward, his hands bound, his steps steady. He walked without resistance, his face calm, his eyes bright. The crowd of aliens hissed and muttered, some spitting, some silent. The council sat high above, ready to watch. The executioner raised his weapon, its blade glowing with deadly energy. The human stood still, looking up at the sky as if the rising sun belonged to him alone. Soldiers shifted nervously. Some expected him to cry out, to finally break, but he did not. His silence was heavier than any scream. And then it happened. From the crowd, one soldier stepped forward. He threw down his spear, his voice ringing loud. Enough! I will not kill a man who does not fear us. He has more strength than all of us combined. His words struck like fire. The council shouted, furious, but it was too late. Another soldier followed, then another. Soon, several had thrown their weapons to the ground, their eyes filled with something new, faith. They looked at the human, not with hatred, but with respect. The crowd roared with division. Some soldiers hissed in rage, others shouted for freedom. The square became a battlefield of voices. The elders screamed for order, but their commands were weaker than before. The unity of their people was broken. Fear, their greatest weapon, no longer controlled everyone. The human had done it. Without lifting a hand, he had divided their empire. The commander stepped forward, her cloak catching the wind. Her eyes burned as she looked at him. The council shouted at her to strike him down, wanting it to prove her loyalty. She raised her hand, her energy glowing bright, the soldiers watching in silence. But she did not strike. Her hand lowered slowly, her gaze locked on the man who stood without trembling. For the first time, she spoke not as a leader, but as a voice filled with doubt. Perhaps we have been wrong. The words silenced the square. Soldiers froze, their claws halfway drawn, their voices caught in their throats. The council roared in fury, but the commander's words had already spread. The human stood in the center, still calm, still unbroken. His courage had turned their fear against them, and now even their strongest leader had begun to question everything. The execution never came. Instead, the square remained in chaos. Soldiers divided, the council enraged, and the commander torn between duty and something she could not yet name. And the human, bound yet undefeated, knew that his fight had only just begun. The chaos of the square did not fade. Soldiers hissed at one another, claws raised, voices sharp with anger and confusion. Some shouted that the human must die, others that he must live. The council screamed for silence, their robes snapping in the wind, their eyes blazing with fury. But their commands no longer held the same power. Too many had already thrown down their weapons. Too many had already felt the pull of doubt. The human stood at the center of it all, still bound, still bloodied, yet calm. He did not shout, he did not beg, he did not even move. His silence was heavier than thunder. Soldiers who looked at him could not deny what they felt. He was not afraid, not of them, not of death, not of anything. And if one man could stand without fear, then what excuse did they have for bowing to it all their lives? The commander stepped forward slowly, her cloak sweeping across the stone. Her orange eyes glowed brighter than ever, her face unreadable. She stood between the human and the executioner, who still held his weapon raised, waiting for the order to strike. The council above roared, demanding her loyalty. Kill him now. Show them fear still rules. Her eyes never left the man. She remembered every word he had spoken, every moment in the labyrinth when he should have died, every time he smiled in the face of pain. She had asked him why he wasn't afraid, and his answer still echoed inside her like fire. She felt something she had not felt in centuries. Not fear, not rage, but truth. She lowered her hand slowly. The executioner froze, confused. The square went silent. No, she said at last, her voice strong, carrying across the crowd. I will not kill him. Gasps spread through the soldiers. The council erupted in fury, their voices breaking into shrieks. Traitor! One elder screamed. You shame your people! But her words had already struck, and the silence that followed was louder than their anger. The human lifted his head. His eyes met hers, and for a moment there was no army, no council, no chains. Only her and him. She stepped closer until she stood right before him. The air was heavy, every soldier leaning forward, waiting. Then, in a voice so quiet yet so sharp that it cut through the silence, she spoke to him. I asked you once why you were not afraid. I understand now. Fear has no chains for you. Her words spread through the soldiers like a spark through dry grass. Some looked at her with disbelief, others with awe. Slowly, soldiers who had been silent began to lower their weapons. More and more joined, the sound of steel striking the stone echoing like drums. The council screamed, but the soldiers no longer obeyed. The human's faint smile returned. He did not speak because there was no need. His answer had already changed everything. The elders made their final move. With a furious cry, one raised his clawed hands, calling forth energy that crackled like lightning. Then you will all burn, he roared. The soldiers gasped as he hurled the power toward the human, a blast meant to erase him completely. But before it struck, the commander moved. She stepped in front of him, her cloak whipping in the storm of energy. The blast hit her squarely, exploding in fire and smoke. Soldiers screamed. The human blinked through the haze, his chest tightening. When the smoke cleared, she still stood, her armor cracked, her body scorched, but her eyes burning brighter than ever. You will not touch him, she hissed, her voice filled with a strength her soldiers had never heard before. She stood straight, her body trembling with pain, but her defiance unshaken. For the first time, the council saw one of their own leaders protect a human with her life. The soldiers roared, not in anger, but in rebellion. Spears and blades were lifted high, not against the human, but against the elders. The square erupted into a storm of battle cries. Fear had been broken. In the middle of it, the human looked at her. She turned her head slightly, her glowing eyes meeting his one last time. She whispered, only for him, your courage is stronger than our chains. You have changed me. Then she lifted her hand, signaling her soldiers, not to kill, but to fight for freedom. The battle that followed shook the very heart of the empire. Elders tried to control their soldiers with terror, but terror no longer worked. The fire of one human's courage had spread too far. The chains of fear had shattered, and with it, their power crumbled. When the fighting ended, the council was broken, their control destroyed. The square was littered with weapons, some bloody, some discarded in peace. Soldiers stood in silence, their glowing eyes turned toward the human who still stood bound in the center. He was no longer a prisoner. He was the spark that had freed them. The commander stepped forward again, her body still wounded, her steps weak but steady. She reached out and broke the chains from his wrists with her own hands. The metal clattered against the ground, echoing louder than any war cry. For the first time, he was free. She bowed her head before him. The soldiers gasped, their commander lowering herself not out of fear, but out of respect. You are no longer our prisoner, she said softly. You are the one who has shown us what strength truly is. The human placed a hand on her shoulder, his eyes steady, his voice quiet but firm. Strength is not in fear. It is in standing when fear says fall. Remember that. The soldiers bowed their heads, one by one, until the entire square bent not to chains, not to terror, but to truth. The sun rose higher, bathing the square in light. And as the day began, every alien there knew that something greater had begun as well. A single human had changed their world, not with weapons or armies, but with courage that refused to bow. And the commander, who once had asked him why he wasn't afraid, now carried the answer in her heart forever.